Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're doing a deep dive into some material that, well, it looks at human connection, influence,
Yeah.
through a really strategic, almost unnerving lens.
Yeah, it's definitely not your typical self-help stuff.
Not at all. It's not about just, being charming or hoping for the best. These writings explore some really potent ideas, and they come with explicit warnings about their power and potential dangers.
Absolutely. So our approach today has to reflect that caution.
Exactly. Our deep dive is going to keep that cautionary tone front and center. The core topic is looking at this specific way of understanding people, and the source uses the historical figure of Casanova as a kind of case study.
Right, as presented in these specific writings we're looking at.
Yeah, we're here to get our heads around the concepts themselves, what this material suggests about human nature, and why the warnings attached are so, well, significant. It's about analysis, right? Grappling with the ideas here, not saying we agree with them.
Precisely. You need sharp critical awareness with this stuff. Our mission really is to pull out those central concepts, understand the arguments being made about, power and vulnerability, and grasp why these tools, as the material calls them, are presented with such gravity, such seriousness.
And it kicks right off as sort of dismantling a common idea, doesn't it? That just being nice or charming or lucky is enough to win people over.
Yeah, it calls that a dangerous illusion, even a trap, straight out of the gate.
Yeah. And instead, it puts forward what it calls a brutal truth, which is
that everyone, apparently, no exceptions, has some kind of deep-seated psychological pressure point, or a hidden wound, maybe an uncontrollable desire.
and the term the material uses for this is
Yeah,
the thumbscrew.
yeah. It's a really stark metaphor, isn't it? Very unsettling. Fits the whole tone.
It definitely does. It immediately sets up this view of human interaction that's all about like underlying fragility of these hidden needs.
Exactly. And the first big warning that the material lays out is pretty severe. It basically says, if you don't find this thumbscrew in other people,
Someone else might.
someone else might, yeah. Or maybe even worse, the implication is, they might find yours.
Which just completely changes the game, doesn't it? Interaction stops being casual and becomes this constant, maybe subconscious negotiation of power and vulnerability.
That's the landscape it paints, yeah.
Yeah.
Very strategic.
Okay, so let's really dig into what the material means by this thumbscrew, this hidden vulnerability, even in people who look really strong on the outside.
Well, the central idea in these writings is that nobody, absolutely nobody, is strong all the way through. That's the claim.
Right.
There's always some point of fragility, some hidden insecurity, or a powerful unmet need kind of lurking behind the mask people wear. And according to this material, Casanova's famous influence wasn't about brute force or just, dazzling charm in the usual sense.
No.
No. It reportedly came from his understanding of this fundamental human fragility. He saw it.
And it suggests he didn't uncover it through, like, being aggressive or pushy.
Quite the opposite, actually. The material uses the phrase seductive finesse. It was about identifying that specific vulnerability, that thumbscrew, and then, well, the source says pressing it with precision.
Wow, precision.
Yeah, but the emphasis is really on the finesse, not force. It's presented as this subtle art.
The material uses Madalena as a key example.
Yeah.
Right. Describe her for us, based on the source.
Yeah, so Madalena is painted as, outwardly very impressive, beautiful, elegant, powerful within Venetian society. That's the strong facade it talks about.
Okay.
But then the source peels back that layer, and underneath it portrays her as being tormented by the quiet terror that she was never good enough.
Oof.
Yeah. Reportedly living for external approval, totally gripped by this deep fear of rejection.
And the material points to that specific thing, that terror of inadequacy, that desperate need for approval, and says that was her thumbscrew.
Exactly that. It zeroes in on that core insecurity. And the insight offered, according to the source, is that Casanova recognized this specific vulnerability, but not with arrogance. It says he used empathy sharpened by experience.
Empathy sharpened by experience. Interesting phrase.
Isn't it? This is where that seductive insight comes in. It's not about being pushy. It's this almost intuitive grasp of someone else's core wound or need. And the warning here, the material really stresses this, is potent. If you want to truly influence someone, you must understand their underlying vulnerabilities.
So it's not just saying people have weaknesses, it's arguing that actively looking for them, understanding them, is essential for any real influence, from this perspective anyway.
That's the argument, yeah. And this flows right into the second big warning the material gives us.
Okay, what's that?
It claims people guard their vulnerabilities even more fiercely than they guard their money.
More than money.
Yeah, it says they will lie, hide, and distract to keep these deep points concealed.
Well, that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? If these thumbscrews are so important for influence, but also so heavily guarded, how, according to these writings, are you supposed to actually find them?
The method it describes sounds simple, but it's demanding. It says, pay attention closely, silently.
Closely, silently.
Yeah. The idea is that even though people try to hide things, the cracks in the facade, they'll eventually show through if you're watching carefully enough. And the material even lists 4 common types of these thumbscrews to look out for.
Oh, really? What are they?
Okay, according to the source, they often show up as 1, a fear someone can't quite name or articulate. 2, a dream they secretly have but feel ashamed to actually pursue.
Right.
3, something from their past they just can't seem to shake off, can't erase.
Okay.
And 4, a really deep need they desperately crave but would never ever confess to openly.
Wow. Those are specific and deep.
They are. And the material insists that figuring out which of these, or maybe what mix of them, is someone's core vulnerability gives you what it calls the invisible thread.
The invisible thread.
Yeah, the thing that connects you to them in a way that allows for influence. If you skip this step, the material argues, they just stay out of reach. You might interact, but you won't get to that core leverage point it's talking about.
So again, it's not about just barging in and demanding they spill their secrets. That seems totally counter to that seductive finesse idea.
Totally. It directly contrasts finding the thumbscrew with using a blunt force or demanding confessions. The material points to Casanova's supposed method again. He didn't interrogate. He created an atmosphere where people wanted to talk by asking gentle questions, probing, but gently, watching their reactions really closely, and crucially, maybe most importantly, he listened, like with intense focus.
Just listen.
Yeah. The source claims that by listening like that, he sort of became a mirror, reflecting back parts of their hidden selves to them, making them feel deeply seen, deeply understood, maybe for the first time.
That's powerful. Becoming a mirror just by listening, reflecting their own hidden stuff back at them.
Exactly. And the conclusion the source draws here is pretty stark. Let other people talk, it says, and they will reveal everything you need to know.
Yeah.
But only if you know how to actually hear it. It puts the focus on your ability to receive, not their willingness to give.
Right. It's like strategic silence, active observation.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift into some of the specific techniques the source mentions for doing this. Technique number 1, observe them like a hunter in the wild. And the big mistake here, it says, is trying too hard to be noticed yourself. Talking too much, showing your own emotions first.
Exactly. That hunter analogy is key. Your goal isn't to announce your presence or make a big splash immediately.
Yeah.
When you're trying to understand someone on this deeper level, you're sort of entering their psychological space.
Right.
So like a hunter, your job is to study, stay still, and just see. Without being the center of attention, the material is super clear. Let go of your own ego, your need to impress right then. Focus entirely outward. Observe.
And what kind of details should you be looking for specifically when you're in this hunter mode?
The source gives examples like, watch how they move or hold themselves when they think no one's really watching. Notice what topics make them pause or hesitate when talking. Pick up on tiny shifts in their tone of voice about certain subjects.
So really small things, micro-level stuff.
Yeah, the emphasis is heavily on those details. The source calls every little observation a thread that leads you towards that hidden vulnerability, the thumbscrew. It argues people tell you who they really are, not just with words, but with silence, reactions, microexpressions, all those nonverbal cues. And it underlines that this takes time. You can't rush it. Rushing means you miss those crucial, subtle signals.
Patience and really deep, sustained observation seems fundamental to this whole approach, which leads right into technique number 2, and this comes with the third big warning. Let them speak. That's where the gold is.
Yes.
And the warning is really specific.
Yeah.
If you're talking more than 40% of the time in an interaction, you're losing.
That's what it claims, yeah. That 40% figure really hammers home the power of listening in this framework. The logic is simple. The more the other person talks, the more they reveal. Their guard tends to drop the longer they speak freely and feel heard.
And what kind of gold does the source say gets revealed when their guard drops like that?
It lists things like their real desires, their disappointments or regrets, their core values, and what it calls their emotional gaps.
Emotional gaps.
Yeah, those areas where they feel something's missing, or they feel hurt or have some deep, unmet longing that kind of thing.
Okay. And then the source says this is when you strike.
Right? Strike sounds aggressive, but it defines it immediately as striking with attention, radical attention, making them feel genuinely seen and heard right in that moment of vulnerability. While they're talking, revealing these deeper things, you are, and this is a vivid phrase the source uses, building a map of their soul.
Building a map of their soul. Wow. Let's bring Madalena back in here. The source suggests Casanova didn't just, flatter her about her looks, which everyone else probably did.
Exactly, that was superficial. He reportedly asked about her fears, her past, her pain, the hidden stuff.
And the claim is, just by answering those questions, talking about those vulnerable parts, she basically handed him the keys.
That's the assertion. She unknowingly gave him the keys to her heart. She revealed her thumbscrew because he created the space and listened with that focused empathy. He received the insight. And the summary point the material makes here is really compelling. It argues most people are just dying to be understood, deep down.
Yeah, I can see that.
So it suggests if you can be the rare person who gives them that gift, who makes them feel truly deeply heard, they will be yours. It frames deep listening not just as, a nice social skill, but as a direct path to this incredible connection and influence.
It's fascinating how it links that basic human need to be understood directly to a method for gaining influence. Almost transactional, in a way.
That's the core tension in these writings, isn't it? It identifies something real about us, that desire to be understood, and then analyzes how, in this particular approach, that very need becomes the doorway for influence.
Okay, let's look at the third technique. Mirror their psychology, but stay mysterious. So influence isn't just about getting close. It needs mystery too. How does that work?
The idea here is once you've observed and listened enough to get a real feel for someone's emotional patterns, their rhythms, their sensitivities, you can subtly mirror them.
Mirror them, like copy them.
Not exactly mimicry. It's more about aligning your responses, your emotional tone, even just your presence, in a way that creates this sense of deep, almost uncanny rapport. The source calls it an eerie bond, like the other person feels you just get them instinctively on a really fundamental level.
Okay, I see. Creates connection. But then where does the mystery come in?
Right, that's the crucial second part. The material says you should avoid becoming totally predictable or always available. Staying slightly unavailable or deliberately remaining just out of reach, that's presented as a tactic.
A tactic for what?
To create tension, desire, obsession. It introduces this dynamic of push and pull. You draw close, then pull back slightly.
Yeah. Like with Madalena again. The source said Casanova didn't just constantly adore her. He introduced resistance. Pulled back sometimes, then came back.
Exactly that. And the source claims that specific tactic, the resistance, created longing when he was away and this heightened gratitude when he returned. It calls the whole thing a delicate dance, but then uses that really striking phrase.
Which was?
Psychological warfare disguised as romance.
Oof. Yeah, that definitely fits the warning tone. Psychological warfare.
It's potent language. It really highlights the calculated intention these writings attribute to these actions.
Which brings us to the fourth technique. And the fourth, final, big warning from the material. Use vulnerability to lead, not dominate. The warning is clear. Seduction, in this context, isn't about domination. It's about direction. You're not trying to overpower them. You're guiding them to want what you want. Exactly. This is the stage where, according to the source, you actually use that understanding of the thumbscrew you've gained. But, and this is critical, it stresses you don't press it cruelly. The instruction is to touch it gently.
Gently. Even though the word is thumbscrew. That feels like a contradiction the source sets up.
It does, but it highlights the subtle, non-brutal nature of the influence being described here. The core idea is that real lasting influence, as these writings frame it, isn't won by causing pain or forcing someone to submit.
Okay, how then?
It's achieved by showing the other person how their deepest needs, their hidden desires or fears, whatever that vulnerability represents, can be met or soothed by aligning with you, by following your lead. You align your desires with theirs. You show them that fixing their emotional gap or getting what they crave is possible through the connection you offer.
So you become the solution to their hidden problem.
In a way, yes. The material goes back to Madalena one last time here. It claims Casanova didn't conquer her like a possession. He liberated her.
Liberated her? From what?
From her shame about not being good enough, her fear of rejection, her constant need to perform for approval. By understanding her core vulnerability and seeming to address it, the source claims she didn't feel forced. She followed him willingly, became emotionally tethered.
So the approach described isn't really about explaining a weakness in a nasty way, but more about positioning yourself as the answer, or maybe the path to relief for that core vulnerability.
That's the sort of nuanced distinction the material makes at this point, and it connects us directly to the final conclusion on this technique. People naturally resist feeling controlled by force,
Right.
but they submit to connection. When someone feels you truly see and understand their core pain, their deepest need, that hidden vulnerability, a really profound trust can develop. And, according to these writings, from trust comes influence.
Wow. So that deep understanding of the thumbscrew, it's not just leverage. It's framed as the foundation for building this specific kind of trust, which then opens the door to influence.
That's the whole intricate mechanism the material lays out. It's a distinct progression. Observe, understand deeply, build connection through that understanding, and then achieve influence by becoming the perceived solution to their vulnerability.
This has been, a genuinely intense deep dive, exploring some really sharp-edged ideas about human interaction from this material. We've covered the main concepts, this idea that everyone has a hidden thumbscrew, the argument that focused observation and deep listening are key to finding it, and these subtle techniques of mirroring and then guiding through that vulnerability. And those warnings woven through everything are just impossible to ignore.
Yeah, the source material is definitely unflinching, and it really underscores its final warnings by saying, look, if you just rely on surface stuff, your wit, your looks, your status, you'll fail. You won't get that deep influence it's talking about.
Right. Fleeting attention maybe, but nothing more.
Exactly. You won't hold their soul, as it puts it. That deeper connection, that profound influence, it claims, only comes when you actually reach and touch that deeper layer, the fragile hidden part inside everyone. The source gives examples of what people hide, fear hidden by pride, longing hidden behind anger. Whatever it is, it's supposedly there. And finding it doesn't just give you influence. The material claims it can lead to loyalty.
Loyalty, that's a really strong word to connect to understanding vulnerability.
It is, isn't it? The source ties it back to that powerful feeling of being truly understood at your deepest, most vulnerable point and having that need addressed or acknowledged. It presents that feeling as the basis for an incredibly strong emotional bond. Loyalty in this context.
Okay.
But true to the whole cautionary feel of this, the material immediately hits you with its starkest reality check.
Which is?
This power, this understanding, it cuts both ways. Just as you might be looking for vulnerabilities in others, the source warns you can bet others are looking for yours.
Right. Makes sense.
And then it gives this direct instruction, almost a command, really, to you, the listener.
What's the instruction?
Hide it well, but look for theirs.
Hide yours. Look for theirs.
Yeah. It frames basically every encounter as potentially strategic, a dynamic where vulnerability is both a target and something you have to protect fiercely. And this leads straight into the material's final, really provocative choice that it puts directly to you.
Okay.
The assertion is, in every single interaction, someone will influence and someone will be influenced. There's no middle ground.
A pretty bleak view, in a way. No opting out.
Not according to this material, no. It doesn't offer a way to just stand aside. It ends by forcing you to consider the principles it laid out by asking one final, really challenging question.
And that question is basically, choose who you want to be.
Pretty much, yeah. It asks you to actively decide, do you want to be like the Casanova described in these writings, the understanding observer, the strategic listener, the subtle influencer? Or do you choose, maybe through inaction, maybe through ignorance of these dynamics, to be left behind? A fate it describes pretty starkly as being the forgotten admirer.
Choose to influence or be influenced. Be the observer or the forgotten. That is definitely a challenging thought to leave things on. This whole exploration has given us a lot to think about regarding those less visible currents in human connection and influence, all delivered with that very deliberate, very unsettling warning tone from the source.
Indeed. It really forces you to confront some potentially uncomfortable ideas, doesn't it? About vulnerability, about power in relationships, maybe about the hidden intentions behind how we interact.
Well, thank you for joining us on this. This pretty intense deep dive into these specific writings. We really encourage you, the listener, to think critically about the powerful and as the source itself frames them, potentially dangerous ideas we've explored today.